Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ignorant Intellectual on Media. Today, I thought we would do our fifth thrift store haul. Um, I went out today and I found a bunch of stuff, a DVD, a Blu-ray, and a bunch of books. So I thought maybe I'd do a quick video of that, and maybe it'd be interesting. Of course, it's going to be interesting because thrift hauls are always interesting, where you can get stuff for such a low price, and you can add it to your media library or your bookshelves. And anyways, let's stop wasting time and get right into it. All right. So this will probably be a pretty quick video. I have some things to do today, so I'll probably go through this pretty quickly. So first up is this box set, this Penguin Classics box set that I found, and I found it for $2.99 or $3. Basically, it's Tolstoy's War and Peace, and they put it into two volumes into this box set. Now, Penguin's been through a whole bunch of editions. This one is the second type of uh, of Penguin Classics. You have like four main types of Penguin Classics. The first ones that they started to release back, I don't know. I'm gonna do a video on the history of the Penguin Classics because it's such a iconic library of books of the classics in Western and Eastern literary history. That it deserves a video on its own. So I'll eventually end up doing a Penguin Classics video on its own. But basically, they've gone through. Um, I like to distinguish them with their book covers, with their their editions or whatever. So they've been through four that I can recall. The latest one. Well, I'm not going to show you all of them, but anyways, this one is the second one. It's basically the first. All right, so the first Penguin Classics, they all kind of look like this. All right, they're all black. All right, but as they move forward, the borders kind of change. These ones are borderless. The second version of the Penguin Classics is borderless, and the first and they all have this penguin on the top, but there's no border. Um, Later on, they end up having a color system that comes up here, and they have a border that goes around here. And then later editions they even move further. But anyways, this one is the second type. The first type is basically exactly the same as these, except when you look on the spine and on the back. All right, so on the back here it says literature fiction right there, and then on the spine it just gives you an ISBN number. Well, what it used to have is an L designation, so L1, L27, L45, which stands for literature number 45 or whatever, right? And they would have it on the back here as well. So when the Penguin Classics first started, they were all numbered, right? So and then they got away from the numbering. Um, anyway, so this is Tolstoy's probably greatest novel, if you can call it a novel, because it's kind of a run-on novel. And they put it out in two volumes. Basically, I read this when I was in my 20s, so like 30 years ago. So the details of it are are foggy to me. But basically, it's it was written in when was it written in 1860? Well, no, it was published in 1869. So the latter part of the 19th century, and it basically is like a historical novel about Napoleon's invasion of Russia. Um, the French invasion of Russia back in the 1800s or whatever, when Napoleon was like going freaky all over Europe. Going freaky. Do you like that expression? Going freaky all over Europe. All right. So basically, that's kind of like a historical narrative novel about that. Um, if I remember correctly, it's a narrative. Anyway, but it there's five aristocratic, aristoc, ignorant intellectual, aristocratic families that he kind of delves into when he's writing about the French invasion of Russia, right? So, but then he kind of goes off on these tangents in the novel where he ends up speaking for long periods of time on history, philosophy, the thoughts that are in his head or whatever. So, so all that rambling made this book such a large book, right? So, um, but it's an interesting read. So those tangents are actually quite interesting to read. They're not like, what the hell are you talking about, Mr. Tolstoy? Get back to the novel. I'm wondering what's happening to this family or that family, and you're talking about philosophy and life. Come on, get back to the novel, right? So no, it's not that way. Usually you like where he leads you, and you like the interesting, thought-provoking stuff that he ends up speaking about in the novel. So it's probably half the reason why that this novel's become so famous and such, one of the classics in Russian literature is maybe even because of Tolstoy's brain work, right? So anyway, so that's War and Peace. All right, I got it in a pretty nice box set, although you can tell its age. So that's War and Peace. Next up, we're going to go jumping way into the future up to 1975. We're going to go to Stephen King's second novel, which was called Salem's Lot. Now, I have not read this book. That's why I picked it up. And I'm ever if you've watched any of my previous videos, I had a bit of a tirade on It, uh, one of his novels, It, basically about an alien who transforms himself into a clown to attract kids because he feeds off kids or whatever. And they're stuck in, they end up looking for his lair, and they end up getting stuck in the sewer system. And Stephen King's brain worked in the only way that they get lost in the sewer system, and uh, the only way that they can figure out how to get out of the sewer system, these, like young teens or whatever, or, older kids, um, is to have a gangbang where there's like four or five guys and one girl, all underage kids or whatever, right? In order for them to magically know where to walk in the in the sewer system to get out of the sewer system. And then I kind of stopped reading his book, so I never did end up coming across this one. But that was like 20 years ago. Maybe I should brush up on some of the Stephen King novels that I haven't read. And I thought maybe this one would be a good one to read. So this is about Salem's Lot, which is basically a vampire novel, right? So this vampire moves uh, to Jerusalem's Lot, which is in the States or whatever. Was it called Jerusalem's Lot? And then it's like nicknamed Salem's Lot or whatever, right? Anyways, he starts um, taking over the town or whatever, right? If I remember correctly, when I read the synopsis of this, right? So, anyways, it's supposed to be a pretty good book. And if you like Stephen King's writing, a lot of it is like he runs on sometimes. He's got some verbal diarrhea or written diarrhea, I guess you could call, where he goes on. I have the same problem. All right. And but a lot of his novels can be really interesting. My favorite novels by him are actually not his horror novels. They're his fantasy novels, like The Talisman or The Stand. Those books. Eye of the Dragon. I always liked those books by Stephen King more than I liked his horror. I don't know. I like fantasy better than horror, so that's the reason why. Anyways, okay, so that's Stephen King's Salem's Lot. Came out in 1975 about a vampire. All right, and next up is now. Also, if you've watched any of my previous videos, when I speak about movies, I say one of my favorite types of movies is a type with a female lead in a like an action or a thriller or whatever, right? Where there's a female that leads. So things like this uh, movie. All right. So this movie is V.I. Warshawski. All right. And it came out in the early '80s. I don't know exactly what date it came out, but it was in the early '80s. During Kathleen Turner's popularity with like Romancing the Stone and those films back in the early '80s. So this came out around the same time. All right, and it's basically she's a private eye in Chicago, and a 13-year-old girl hires her to find out who murdered her father or whatever, right? And goes on from there. And she's a uh, she she takes no shit, in other words, and it's a I find it an extremely good film. I don't know if others, because I'm not sure how it was. My memory is a bit foggy on. I don't think this film did all that. all that great in the theaters, and critics were kind of like iffy on it, maybe warm but not hot, maybe lukewarm on it. But like I said, it's one of my favorite types of films where because you see so many action films with male leads that you know you're going to see them all the time. So when you see one with a female lead, um, it's like cool. You know what I mean? It's different. It's like watching women's tennis. It's a lot funner to watch women's tennis than it is men's tennis for some reason. Um, I don't know why. Women's golf, same way. If you watch golf, women's golf is a lot funner to watch than men's golf. I mean, in my opinion, anyways. So, so every once in a while, it's good to watch a film with lead character being a female in an action film, right? Not in a love story or a romantic comedy or something like that, but like in an action film, like a guy film, but it's a woman that leads, right? She goes out and kicks some ass, right? It's always fun to watch that, right? And this one is one of the better ones, all right? So it's called VI Wachowski, and it stars Kathleen Turner as V.I. Wachowski, a private eye in Chicago. All right, so that's one of the Blu-rays. I have this on DVD, so now I can join the two of them together. All right, and save a little bit of space on my shelves. And I also found this uh, Warner Brothers four film favorites. They put out a whole bunch of these on DVD where they give you four movies in one DVD package, right? And this one is the Martin Scorsese collection, and it gives you four of Martin Scorsese's films: Goodfellas, The Departed, Mean Streets, and The Aviator. So basically, his best film overall is probably this one. All right, that's one of the greatest gangster films of all time. All right, it's probably up there. Uh, Goodfellas and Once Upon a Time in the West is probably another great one, and The Godfather. Those three are probably the epic, the top tier of gangster films, right? And so Scorsese did this one, Coppola did The Godfather, and Leone did Once Upon a Time in America, not in the West. Once Upon a Time in America. All right, so those are probably my three favorite gangster films. Um, anyway, so that's one of the great gangster films. Everybody knows it. You probably know it as well. The Departed, which is um, Scorsese's remake or American adaptation of the Hong Kong cinema film Infernal Affairs, and it has the distinction of being one of the most surprising films I've ever watched. When it gets to the end, I never would have guessed that would happen, right? So, and it made me search out Infernal Affairs. And if you haven't watched Infernal Affairs, there's three of them. It's a trilogy. Watch all three of them. They're great. All right. Anyway, so it's one of the great Hong Kong films up there with Jackie Chan's Police Story and all those great action films um, coming out of Hong Kong in like the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, right? Um, so he did an adaptation of Infernal Affairs, and he called it The Departed, and it's about uh, two cops. Uh, One is a gangster who goes to the police academy on behalf of his gangster boss and infiltrates the police for the mafia or whatever. And the other one is a police officer right out of the academy who they put undercover to infiltrate that criminal organization. So you have a cop who is a criminal and a criminal who is a cop. All right. And it's an interesting juxtaposition, and all shit hits the fan and everything throughout the film. And the ending is quite surprising. I would have, it took me back. Usually, most films these days, you watch it and you kind of see this. If there's going to be a twist in it, you kind of see it, right? You see it coming. They're not as good at or clever as covering these twists up. Like you get those big twist films, like The Sixth Sense and those kind of films, right? And The Departed is kind of like that at the end. There's this twist that what? No way, really? Anyway, so I won't tell you what it is. All right, so that's another one of. So Goodfellas is one of the greatest gangster films of all time. So is The Departed. It's one of the greatest adaptations of all time, and it's one of Scorsese's best films. Mean Streets is another gangster film. It's one of his first gangster films, so that's always good to have and watch it and see how it develops from there to here. It's the advancement is very interesting to see when. So watch this one first, and then this one if you get this package right, and then you have Aviator, another DiCaprio film where he plays Howard Hughes, the eccentric billionaire who makes airplanes and has a germ phobia where he's washing his hands all the time, right? All right, so and that was pretty good. Not as good as the other three, I don't think. I don't. The Aviator isn't one of Scorsese's greatest films, but it is a good film. All right, it's above average, but when you talk about Scorsese, those films are like in the upper echelon of films, you know, of all the films ever made, right? So when he does, let's say that um, the Aviator, you go, okay, that was good. That was a good film, but it wasn't a film that blows you away or anything. Anyways, but I found this for like $3 for the 4 films. So I think after I bought it and I got in my car, I said, I think I have this. Maybe I'm not sure. I think I may have this because I think I had it at one time, but then I got all 4 of these eventually on Blu-ray, and so then I took the DVDs out of them and put them in the Blu-ray cases, and then got rid of this case. Um, I think, anyways, I'll have to check on my shelves. If so, then I'll just resell it or whatever. All right, but it's Scorsese is a a director that you definitely should watch if you haven't, and not many haven't. Let's put it that way. All right, so next up is I found 2 books by Anton Chekhov of his short stories. All right, so he is considered Chekhov, anyways, is considered probably the greatest short story writer of all time. All right, um, even in translation, his stories. So this one leads with the duel, and this one leads with the fiance. But his like when you talk about the greatest short story writers of all time, Chekhov always rises to the top of the list for some reason. I haven't read much of his stuff. I'm not a big short story reader. Um, but I would say out of everybody that I've read in the short stories, like I said, I haven't read Chekhov much in the short stories, but like Alice Munro, the Canadian, she won the Pulitzer. She's a great short story writer, and there's other Kurt Vonnegut. His short stories are really good. But anyway, so I found these two. So I figure I'd brush up on his short stories. So I got 2 books full of his short stories. It should be fun to read. If you haven't checked out, like I said, his reputation as a short story writer is second to none. So, have you read Chekhov? Which are your favorite short stories by him? Is it The Duel or The Fiance? Which one is it? Maybe that I should read first to get blown away. What do you think? No. Anyway, so that's that one. Next up is Fanny Burney's Camilla. All right. So this is a book that came out in the 18th century, the late 18th century, like 1796. And it's basically um, way back then, and it's a female writer, right? So basically, this is kind of like a romance novel, and I have not read it. And look how thick it is. I don't know. Are you of the opinion similar to me that it's easier to read male writers if you're male, and it's easier to read female writers if you're female? I mean, to enjoy them, you know what I mean? So I find the same thing with comics as well. Like when I watch stand-up comedy and I watch a female stand-up comic, a lot of the humor it kind of goes over my head or it passes me or I don't find it humorous, right? Um, but then when I listen to a male comic, I relate more to him being male, I guess, and his stuff seems to be funnier. It's a similar way when it comes to female writers, I think, and male writers. I have a tendency to enjoy male writers more than female writers. Now, one of my all-time favorite writers, I really like Alice Munro, but Margaret Atwood, all of her stuff I really liked. So there is, I guess, exceptions to it, but I'm not sure if I would want to invest. I mean, I bought the book, but I bought the book because it's one of the Oxford World's Classics, and I collect those books, right? The Oxford World's Classics. Anyways, maybe I'll get around to reading this. Have you read Camilla? Um, if you have, what do you think of it? Was it as good as everybody uh, talks about? Because it's almost 1,000 pages, 955 pages, 956 pages about a romance back in what? Let's see. First published in hey, I got it right, 1796. Camilla deals with the matrimonial concerns of a group of young people, Camilla Tyrald, and her sisters, the daughters of a country parson, and their cousin, Indiana Lynmere, and in particular with the love affair between Camilla herself and her eligible suitor, Edgar Mandelbert. The path of true love, however, is strewn with an intrigue, contretemps, and misunderstanding. An enormously popular 18th century novel, Camilla is touched at many points by the advancing spirit of Romanticism. As in Evelina, Fanny Burney weaves into her novel strands of light and dark comic episodes and gothic shudders, and creates a pattern of social and moral dilemmas which emphasize and illuminate the gap between generations. So, I mean, with that write up, it sounds kind of interesting. Like Camilla and her boyfriend, they fall in love and they're going to get married, but a whole bunch of things happen that strain that and make it difficult to kind of interesting. But I think I don't know, maybe I'm like I said, I find male writers easier to read than female writers for some reason. But maybe I'll give this one a shot. Anyways, if you've read it, give me some advice about it. What do you think of it? Is it good? All right. So that's Camilla. Next up is, all right. So growing up, and it's probably still the same today. All right. Growing up, um, okay, let's talk about Israel for a second. All right. Or Palestine, depending on which side of the fence you're on. All right. Israel as a country was created in the late 1940s after World War II. And I'm no expert in history or anything, but it was basically an English protectorate back in those days. And, the Jewish Zionists convinced the English to, carve out a territory in Palestine for them. And I think maybe the guilt of, the Holocaust played a big part in that, right? And so the Western nations, England and the United States and so on, said, okay, let's set up this country for Jews or whatever, right? In their you know historic homeland or whatever, right? Now the Palestinians have been around with the Jews in Palestine since recorded time. So you kind of have to refer to the Torah or the Bible or whatever to look to see whether. Anyways, I don't know the history of that. I'm not an expert on it, but this guy is, all right, and his name is Martin Gilbert, all right. So he has written the definitive history of Israel. All right. So when I started searching out and wanting to know, because it always makes the news. There was hijackings. There was like wars between Israel and the rest of the Arab nations that surround it, and so on and so forth. And there's always interest in that area of the world because there's always some sort of bombing or something going on there all the time, right? And I'm going, well, what's the solution? You can't figure out the solution. Well, if you want to find the solution there, I mean, just for your own mental stability, I guess you could say, or like so that you can understand because every time you turn on the news, something's happening there, right? At least with me growing up. So I said, okay, so what I did was I picked up this book and I read this book, all right, and it's an extremely good history book and of the history of Israel, all right. So um, it goes through all the stuff, and you can pick up other books as well. But I think the core, maybe the first book, if you want to start understanding, um, you know, Israeli, Palestinian, Arab Israeli relations, and so history and all that. This would be a good book to start with. All right. And Martin Gilbert is not, um, a lightweight. Let's put it that. Sir Martin Gilbert is Winston Churchill's official biographer and the leading historian in the modern world. All right, he's one of the greats, all right, one of the great historians. All right, um, his novel or his book, The Holocaust: The Jewish Tragedy, is considered a classic work on the subject, and he is the author of 80 books, including Churchill: A Life, The First World War, The Second World War, A History of the 20th Century, The Righteous, and so he lives in London, England, is what it says on the back of this book. All right. So this is a revised and updated edition of it for Israel's 60th anniversary. All right. So this was published, when was it? In 2008. So it was originally written in 1998, and then 10 years later, for Israel's 60th anniversary, um, they updated it and put it out again, published. So this is probably the definitive work on the history of Israel. All right, and uh, let me know if you read it. What do you think? Am I correct in that assumption, or I don't know if it's really an assumption. Declaration, I guess, would be a better word for it. Anyway, so if you are going to want to know about the history of Israel, this is probably the book that you should go, and maybe read a book on the history of Palestine, from the Arab point of view, and maybe you'll get a all around type of. Anyways, so that's the one history book. All right. So the second, I also picked up a second set of history books, and if you've watched my previous videos, you know about the International Collectors Library. It's a very popular set of books. They're all faux leather and reasonably priced. And basically, this one is the two-volume set of The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. All right. And basically, the more popular one that you'll find is one with it's a black cover with a swastika on the front of it, right? Um, but I guess the International Collectors Library decided to do a two-volume set on Shire. Is that how you pronounce his name? Shearer, William L. Shearer's definitive work on Nazi Germany. Okay, so if you want to read about Israel: A History by Martin Gilbert is probably the book that you should go to first. And if you want to read about how the Third Reich or the Nazi Germany, how Hitler came to power, how um, uh, Germany changed into a fascist state after World War One in order to cause World War Two, right? This is where you should be going. All right. Um, his his well, here it's two volumes. You can get a one-volume hardcover book of this as well. And there's actually a really tall kind of picture book that goes through a whole bunch of pictures, and it's like a supplementary to that history book. You can find it as well. All those are worth a read if you want to learn about Nazi Germany. He's the definitive guy that wrote this. So if you want to read about the Roman Empire, one of the main ones is that 6-volume set, the decline of the Roman Empire. It basically goes through the history of the Roman Empire. I can't remember the Gibbon. I think it was Edward Gibbon who wrote those books. That is where you go for the Roman Empire, ancient Rome. All right. But when you're talking about Nazi Germany, this is the book that you go to. All right. And it's part of the International Collectors Library, which they're fun to collect. They're just difficult to keep in really good condition. So I usually wrap them up because the spines, the front covers, the bottoms, and the top crack easily. And they're not made of the best stock of paper and everything. Um, but uh, they have a really good collection of very good books in the collector's library. So a lot of people collect these volumes, right? So that's the map of Europe during the rise of the Third Reich, and that's the map of Europe during its fall. All right. So it has it on the front and the back of the inside cover of the two volumes, right? So anyway, so if you're looking to read about Nazi Germany, go out searching out and find The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William L. Shearer, and that is probably the definitive history of that period of time in European history, right? So, all right, so the International Collectors Library version of it. And last but not least, one of the greatest philosophical works of all time, and that's Plato's Republic. All right. So when you're reading about Western philosophy, you usually start with the ancient Greeks. All right. And there's two books um, by Plato that you would read, or there's a collection of books like Credo, and there's like 4 or 5 books together in one book that you can pick up, and this is the other one by Plato that you should read. And then you go on to read Aristotle, which was his student, the politics, ethics, that those books as well. And then you move. There's also works by the pre-Socratic philosophers, the Stoics and those guys that you would read as well. And then you would kind of move more into the future, and you'd read the German and the English and the French philosophers, during the 17, 16, 1700s and that kind of thing. Anyways, there's a whole history of philosophy that you go, but the start of it is this guy probably, Plato, and the ones that just came before him and after him. All right, and this is his definitive work. Has the allegory of the cave in it and all the other things that he spoke about that have become, you know, um, classic talkabouts, classics, um, uh, conversation pieces when you speak with philosophers. All right, they always come back to Plato at some point, right? So, um, and it's not it's not a huge tome, so you can read it pretty quickly as well. It was when I decided I was going to. If you watch the video of the intro to this channel, I said that I couldn't afford university, but it doesn't. I live in a free country, so it doesn't mean that I can't get an education myself, right? So that's what I did. And the first book that I picked up when I was in my mid 20s and went on a reading binge for like 20 years. This was the first book I picked up, and I still remember the bachelor apartment that I was living at the time. It was in the summer when I picked that up, and the previous tenant to this bachelor's apartment, which used to be a hotel. They converted it into apartments. So every every apartment in it was basically a big room with a kitchen and a living room in one, and there was no bedroom, and you had a bathroom with a shower in it, right? So that was basically the bachelor's apartment you had. So I would go out on the balcony because there was a balcony, and the previous tenant left his comfortable chair out on the balcony, and it was in the summertime. So I sat down on that chair in the summer, and this was the first book that I read, and I went through a ton of books sitting on that comfortable chair out on the balcony of my bachelor apartment when I was in my like mid 20s or whatever, right? So this will always be a fond memory. This book, all right. So it's one of the greats in philosophy. If you read philosophy, you're going to be reading this book, all right, and it's actually fun to read, even if you're not in university taking philosophy 101 or whatever, right? It's fun to read just to expand your mind and learn about the most famous part of this is the allegory of the cave, right? So, anyways, all right. So that's Plato's Republic, and those are all the stuff that I picked up today or the last couple of days. So so that's this haul that I picked up today. It ended up being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 books and one DVD set of 4 films and one Blu-ray. And I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for joining me. If you liked it, leave a thumbs up. Uh, think about subscribing if you haven't, and I'll talk to you in the next video. And you have a good day, and bye for now.